Hello, my name is Colby Voss, and I will be discussing the influence of Reformed tradition in the American founding. My central reading was Vindiciae contra Tyrannos, The Influence of Reformed Tradition in American Founding, from the book Faith and the Founders of the American Republic, by Mark David Hall and Daniel Dreisbach. In this book, their central argument is that Reformation theology, as well as political culture, plays a key role in shaping the political institutions of early America, which is a point that's often overlooked. And the founding is sometimes often described primarily as a product of Enlightenment. I will also utilize the sources of historians John Witt Jr., Barry Allen Shane, and James Hudson to further reinforce this argument. So, a little bit of background. Hall and Dreisbach point out that in 1776, study shows as many as 3/4 of Americans were connected with Reformed churches, for example, Congregationalist or Presbyterian communities, which were inherited, or which communities inherited Calvinist ideals of things like the covenant of government, the idea of limited authority, and the duty to resist tyranny or an unjust ruler, an ungodly ruler. This theology helps make early Americans receptive to the revolutionary arguments, especially as tensions with Great Britain begin to arise. In his work, The Reformation of Rights, John Witt Jr. Further reinforces this point by demonstrating how Reformed thinkers like Calvin and Beza articulate their theories of rights and resistance prior to Locke, who is commonly cited as one of the key historical actors in the founding of America. According to Witt, their writings help provide colonists with a framework of the Covenant of Liberty, as well as checks on authorities, which informed their relationship and their debates with Britain. In Vindiciae contra Tyrannos, Hall and Dreisbach talk about the 1579 Huguenot resistance, which taught that rulers who violated the divine rule or the popular covenant or the seeking of the common good forfeited their authority as a leader. Therefore, citizens can, but also should resist unjust rulers. Further along in colonial America, sermons and pamphlets continue to echo this theology, again giving a foundation based in religion to the political resistance of the time. In his work, The Myth of American Individualism, Barry Allen Shane also supports this interpretation. He argues that Americans were not simply inspired by Locke, but instead they were a close-knit member. They were close-knit members of communities that emphasized things like duty, morality, and the obligation of the covenant. This perspective from Shane also reinforces the argument of Hall and Dreisbach that early Reformed tradition gave Americans a moral vision that would help shape their revolutionary ideals in their dealings with Great Britain. Hall and Dreisbach in their work are particularly critical of scholars who portray the founders as secular, saying that the founding documents were specifically like a deist work and completely removed from early Reformation thoughts. But Hall and Dreisbach encourage a broadening of historical actors, looking at people like ministers and congregants, which help present Reformation theology as central to the founding of America. Hudson's work, The Founders on Religion, also reinforces this by demonstrating that biblical and Protestant references outnumber the reference to Enlightenment citations in the political writings of the time. He also notes that leaders like John and Samuel Adams often relied on early Protestant reformers in their arguments. Witt also adds that features in the Constitution, like the separation of powers, reflects Calvinist doctrines of things like covenantal checks on authority and human depravity. So the insistence that no human authority should be absolute mirrors that of Reformation thought that humanity must be restrained by balancing the power in both the church and the state. In conclusion, the Reformation tradition was key to shaping early American political thought and the founding documents. Hall and Dreisbach in their work show how covenantal theology and resistance influenced the founding. Witt further reinforces this point by talking about how these ideas developed into the tradition of personal rights. Shane continues this argument by saying their communal dimension also plays an integral role. And Hudson lastly reveals how deeply the Reformation thought informed the political writings of the time. And in combination, these works highlight that the American founding wasn't just an Enlightenment project, but one that was rooted in Reformation political tradition.